the recording. Go to the cloud. Okay. So we are live.
Great. All right. We're ready to go then.
So please everyone mute yourself so that Gilbert.
Okay. Let's begin. Join palms, bow. 4 great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Okay. Hello to you all. Today we're going to continue with the patriarchs. We have already talked about Bodhidharma, Dhammo, and we talked about Hueca. And today we talk about Sasan, and kind of an interesting one in terms of Sasan, because how much do we really know about Sasan? Does anybody have any information other than he was the Dharma heir of Hueca? Do you know what he's known for? About his life? Anything about him? Very interesting, because Sasan, and doing my research for this, there's essentially like two compendiums that he appears in. One of them is the follow-up of volume to the Eminent Monks of Chan, and then there's another one of I think it's called the Five Treasures, and these are pretty much what everybody quotes in terms of Sasan. And so these come a few years after his life, but there's very little that is written by him and very little that is told about his stories. What is the main poem that he is known for? Anybody know? Should be an easy one. Yes, Sister Jinho.
Faith in Mind.
Faith in Mind. I thought you were going to say it in Chinese.
信心明生灿大事.
Yes, so Faith in Mind. So this is what he's known for. Although there are many historians that doubt that he wrote it, and they think that it more likely it was some of his disciples that wrote it rather than he did. So again, we're kind of looking at these things, and I'm telling you these things because I think you should know it. So if you were talking to somebody and say, oh, Faith in Mind, and go, oh, that fraud, he didn't even write that, and you wouldn't even know. You go, really? But now you know. He may or may not have wrote it, but it doesn't matter because the poem itself is very, very important in the development of Chan. And here we have, for the first time, a very lengthy description of the practice of Chan and the realization of Chan. And it's very interesting because it is written with a spirit of Taoism, and that kind of colors it in a way to make it palatable to the Chinese. And so this is something that's coming along. Buddhism's been in China for a while, but still there's strong sentiments towards Confucianism and Taoism. And it's kind of like somebody preparing a dish and in the style of their own country. I remember going to Pizza Huts in Taiwan, and the pizzas are, you know, I don't know how many of you put corn on your pizzas or green vegetables or whatever, but they love doing that stuff there. So they stylize the pizza and according to their palate. And here, Faith in Mind has done that with respect to the to Buddha Dharma and the spirit, and so we have a very strong Tao influence. The Taoist, their main book, I'm going to butcher the name. It's Te Ching. How do you say that?
道德经
Say it again.
道德经
Tao Te Ching. And so this book is very important, probably written around 400 BC, but it sets forth the way in terms of doing it. And in the Faith in Mind, the Sasan is using that term, the way, in a way kind of balancing a little bit of Taoism, but also going, well, this way is a little bit different than what you think it is. The way in Taoism is more centered towards the idea of everything moving together. Then you see the Tai Chi symbol, and everything is moving and in balance with everything, and there's this chi flow that's moving through everything. Whereas the way to Buddhists is we even take away the way. When they say, where's the way? And you say, no way. And they say, no way, you know, and actually that's an insult in Spanish. No way, meaning like, no, you ox. So, but anyway, the idea is that there is this kind of a path that one follows, but yet in Buddhism, we don't look at it as a path. In this way. What is the background of this, and what was being transmitted by the patriarchs up to this point is the understanding of from Nagarjuna from 100 to 150 CE of emptiness, of sunyata. And so there's this idea of this emptiness and ekayana, just mind. And so this is being kind of mixed in with a little bit of Taoist references and color in order to make it digestible to Chinese. Again, whether or not Sasan is the true author of it, it is not as important as the significance of it. And what we have is these compilers of famous people. And here this compiler, Dao Shan, he actually wasn't a Chan practitioner. He was a Buddhist, but he wasn't a Chan practitioner. And he's compiling and putting together all of these different people that are referenced in the form of first, second, third. But he didn't call them first, second, third. It's very interesting. All of a sudden, Sasan became the third patriarch, but it wasn't a direct reference by Dao Shan. It was that he was mentioned after Huike. And so everybody just assumed that Sasan was the third patriarch. And so then all of the perhaps hagiography, the kind of things made up to kind of fill that in and have that kind of fit in terms of it. But there was several disciples of Huike at that time, and they were good disciples and good practitioners. So it's interesting how things happen where they all of a sudden you see something and we think, oh, who are the patriarchs, and we run through all the names of them, and then we go, well, but you mean it isn't all that clear? No, it isn't really that clear. I mean, to Buddhists, they will swear on a stack of Bibles, well, because that's kind of a free one for them. But they will say, well, this is the order, because that's how we look at it. But history and the idea of doing what I've mentioned before, historicity of something, is a little bit different in terms of how we look at it and how we see it. And we see the development of Chan. And that's why I was emphasizing from the very beginning about Dhammo or Bodhidharma is what he represents that was valuable, something much larger than the historical figure, something that was essentially the first beacon of Chan. And so all of these are, let's say, we're creating a historical stupa of all of these people to represent Chan and represent the development of Chan, which is absolutely fascinating how it develops, because Chan wasn't something like Taoism, where Taoism was just Taoism. Chan was this pot that all sorts of different pieces, like a stew that was put in to make Chan. And so it came up in this way where it worked. It kind of reminds me, there's a Brazilian martial arts called Vale-tudo. And Vale-tudo, it is Portuguese, but in Spanish, it means that everything is of value. And so they take pieces of this art and this art, and they use all of this together with jujitsu and different types of grappling and all sorts of different skills. And they take what works. And that's what Chan did. Chan took all these pieces and go, these work. Contemplation, it works. Meditation works. Ekayana, that works. Buddha nature, that works. And so they take all of these things and put them together. And we can't even call it so much of an integrated practice, because to try to say, okay, now this is the practice, would not be Chan. You see, because if you point to it and say, oh, that's Chan, then you don't know. It's like jazz. If you listen to jazz, it's very interesting because they will take tunes and they will play them in a way you never thought that they could play. They'll play Bye Bye Blackbird, a swing tune, and change it all around into something absolutely incredible. And they don't lose the melody or the tune. They just change the way that one hears that, and in a different way. And that's what Chan was doing at this point. So here we're getting the first glimpses of something that's a substantial amount of Dharma presentation. And so this represents quite a bit. Now, they believe that it might have been Ning To who wrote the Faith in Mind, and kind of like a reworking of his Song of Mind. But then again, there's not really great historicity. That's just a lot of times what it is people are looking at the syntax, the algorithms in text. Now they can do that with computers and match up some of the things in terms of how things are written, the cadence, the verses, all of that stuff. They can match up and say, this one sounds the same. It's like a voice matching system where people can say, oh, that's Gilbert's voice, because you see these things match up in terms of the inflection in his voice and everything. And so it's interesting to see this, because this is coming up, and all the time we just read it. We don't even know. Now, the famous story that continues the passage of from Bodhidharma to Weka to quieting the mind, and show me your mind and I'll quiet it, then comes up again. And this is probably the second thing that people talk about in terms of Sesam, because there isn't a whole lot more to talk about in terms of writings at this point. So this comes from the book, The Mind of Chinese Chan, but it shows up in many different books. Again, this is because all of this stuff is things that are in the compendiums, and then everybody copies those compendiums from the 8th century and the 14th century. No, because that's all they have to go work with. So this one says, Sasan said to Huike, I have rheumatism. Please confess this sin for me. Now, today, I found that it might not have been rheumatism. It might have been leprosy. Now, who is to say which one it is? Let's just say he's physically sick, but that's just another way that I'm showing you in terms of how things are written. And if you're going to say something, you would probably say, oh, he had rheumatism. Let's not say he had leprosy, you know. So in any case, he said, confess the sin for me. And I use this a lot, this term, saying, will you confess the sin of whoever just asked a question? Because in their question, there is a flaw. And so confessing the sin, meaning to show the flaw. And so he's saying to Huike, you know, how did I get this? I'm not really that bad of a person. And so Huike said, show me your sin and I will confess it for you. And after a long period of reflection, Sasan said, I have looked for, but I'm unable to find my sin. Huike replied, I have thus finished confessing your sin, but you must still rely on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. In other words, he cannot find the sin. So it does not belong to him. This is taken later on by a famous master where somebody came to him and said, I'm very angry, you know, how can you help me with this? And then the master said to him, show me your anger. And he says, but I'm not mad right now. How can I show you something when I'm not mad? And he said, if it was belonged to you, you would be mad all the time. But since it responds to certain causes, then this is a condition. It's not really belongs to you. And so this is kind of the same vein in terms of following on with Chan and seeing that these things are attachments or duality. Sasan said, seeing you, I know what the Sangha is, but I'm not clear about the Buddha and the Dharma. Huike replied, this mind is the Buddha. This mind is the Dharma. They're not two. The Sangha also is this mind. Sasan then said, today I know the nature of sin is neither inside nor outside nor in between. It is just like the mind that is not separate from the Buddha and the Dharma. And this is a very important part. Do you know what he's referencing about inside, outside, or in between? Anybody know what that reference is to? Nobody? Bonus points. Ian?
Shurangama Sutra.
Who's saying to who?
The Buddha, well, Ananda is trying to describe where he believes his mind is to the Buddha.
Yeah, and so it's from the Shurangama Sutra. So all of this, obviously, I think by this point, whoever wrote this, for the sake of right now, Sasan, has experienced the Shurangama Sutra and the idea that mind cannot be found inside, outside, or in between. So it's very interesting references. And when you begin to look at these stories, then you begin to have the pieces fit together in terms of Buddha Dharma. And then you see things in a way that you hadn't experienced them before or seen them before. And that's important in terms of looking at these. Now, since there's not a whole lot, let me see if there's some other stuff about him. Again, he was referenced in the Compendium of the Five Lamps. That was a 13th century compilation. And then also, and that was in the first of those those 5 lamps, which was the transmission of the lamp. So that was in the first section. All right, how did this lamp start? So some of you might have heard that reference to those writings of the transmission of the lamp. I think there's a book by that name. I couldn't find it today. I'm sure I have it. And then the earlier version was Dao Shan, Taohsaun. He's kind of important because he was the ones that was chronicling the very first Chan masters that were coming through. Although it wasn't a compendium of Chan, it was just, okay, these are these eminent masters of Buddhism in China. And so that's where you get the references, most references to all these people, because there was nothing else that was written contemporaneous to that, and anything that was written after always references, either by reference or by plagiarism, what was written in those two. There isn't much more there. Okay, I'm going to go to the faith in mind, and we may stay on this for a while, or we may not, depending on how it flows. And I think that Michael, you had the faith in mind. There's a reference there, if you guys want to take a look at that. I don't know. We can't put it up on the screen.
We can. I posted the link in the chat, and I can bring it up to the screen, but then we cannot see you. So
it's okay. You don't need to see me. I just a talking, moving mouth.
Okay.
So I'd rather have you put the screen up.
Let me share my screen then. Let's see whether it works.
See if you can do that. Because if we can do it right, I want to see these 3 translations side by side.
Okay, can you see this?
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, let me reduce this down. Okay, you should be seeing on your screen like 3 columns, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Hold on. And give me 1 second. I can't take all right. So what we have here is the faith in mind. Translation 1 is from Master Sheng. The next one is by a person by the name of Andy Ferguson, and the last one is from Stanley Lombardo from the University of Kansas. And it's kind of interesting to see translations and how people see them, and how the words they pick to say things. A lot of times it's similar, but sometimes it's a little bit different. So we'll start with it. And this first verse, especially the first 2 lines, is very famous, and it's something that I would highly recommend that you remember this, okay? Because it will help you in your practice as kind of a lamp that enables you to see things in the right way, especially when we're suffering through some adverse situations. It helps quite a bit, or some victories sometimes, just to make sure that we balance everything out. So it says, the supreme way is not difficult if only you do not pick and choose. And I like Master Shen Ying's version of this better than the others. The second version, for instance, has attaining the way. And we know already that there is no attainment. So that word, while it may seem right in the context of Buddha Dharma, is not correct. And so that's why you see, you have to be very careful with the translation. Some of you who are out there who are practicing translation, you can see how that word, even though it sounds correct, is not correct in the context of what is being translated. And then The next line is neither love nor hate, and you will clearly understand. So neither love nor hate, and you will clearly understand. This is something very difficult for us to understand, right? To neither love nor hate. Some of us love hating, and others of us hate loving, you know, because we get burned or we get hurt. But we use this middle ground, which is from Madhyamika and the middle way. But here it is also, there's a tone of Taoism in here, trying to have something that there is a balance there. Just think again of the Tai Chi symbol, and you'll see there's this kind of a balance that is being reflected in this part. And then if you look over to the right on that, from the third translation, it says, cut off all likes and dislikes. And this isn't quite correct. Again, because when we're saying cut off, it isn't in this way that we have to try to chop something off, or include something or chop something off. That's not quite correct. And this is a reflection of a person who's translating words and is a professor of Buddhism, but does not have a realization to choose the appropriate words. Be off by a hair, and you are as far from it as heaven from earth. And so the others is a gap between heaven and earth, or splits from heaven and earth. But I still like Master Shen Yang's translation, or the translator that was helping him in doing this. This makes more sense here. So then the second verse is, if you want the way to appear, and then the other one is, if you want to see, if you want it to come forth, and the other is to see the truth. Again, if you say I would translate it for the way to appear, but that's fine the way it's written. And it says, be neither for or against. And here, when we say be neither for or against, again, this is we're dealing with the duality of things, so that we don't want to have this idea of likes and dislikes, picking and choosing, any kind of a duality there. And it says for and against, opposing each other. This is the mind's disease. And the other one are the sickness of the mind, or the mind's disease, same thing. And it's interesting because when we talk about the mind's disease, I really like to break that term disease down to two, the dis and the ease. Saying that because it's more of a way that the mind is not settled. And the reason that it's not settled is if we're for something or against something, it cannot be settled. So there's a dis-ease in the mind. The mind itself does not have a sickness. It just has an uncomfortableness. But then the Buddha nature, although it's not mentioned here, that is why the Buddha nature is so functional and dynamic, because it wants to remove that kind of a mental state. So the next one is, without recognizing the mysterious principle, it is useless to practice quietude. So what do you think? What is this mysterious principle? So that one of them says, if you miss the deep meaning, or without knowing the great mystery, what is this mysterious principle? One of them saying this is the great mystery. But is it a great mystery, or is it a principle? What do you think? Do you know what we're talking about? Anybody have an idea what is being talked about in terms of this mysterious principle?
This is Mark. I think it's a principle, and it's what the, let's say, the prior two sections are pointing to in terms of maintaining this neutrality.
All right. Anybody else?
The right view.
And what is in the right view? What is the right view? What is the essence of the right view? I've been
How
hitting
the
on
mind works.
that everything is created by the mind. So there's no duality. So Mark, I give you a half credit on yours, you know. It is that everything is created by the mind. There's not a duality whatsoever in all of this. This is this mysterious principle. The mystery is only the mystery to sentient beings. To mind, there is no mystery to it. It's clear, but from the samsaric side, it's a mystery. And if you miss the deep meaning, but the deep meaning is everything is created by the mind. So this is very, very important here in terms of this is the esoteric aspect of it, which you would say is kind of this mysterious principle, but mysterious in that way is it's mysterious because it cannot be seen from the sentient side, but the principle is that everything is created by the mind. And then you could say the axiom to that everything is created by the mind is causes and conditions never fail, which is pratika samappada. Okay, so but this is more kind of meshing with Taoism, so it doesn't go that deep in terms of that. The next verse is, the way is perfect like great space, without lack, without excess. Because of grasping and rejecting, you cannot attain it. And the others will say, due to picking up and discarding, you will not know it. You cannot see things as they are. This one where it says without lack or without excess, it mirrors what is said in the Heart Sutra, that in an opposite way, which is but the same, is that it does not increase or decrease. It is just that way. Sometimes they say if the vision expands this far, the mind expands the same amount. It is just in this way. If it contracts, it contracts. But if something was to go far out, mind would be there because it's infinite. It's far beyond any kind of cogitation or conjuring in the mind. It is just the way it is. And this idea of grasping or rejecting, you cannot attain it. And this is important to me too, because this is kind of something that I'm always working on in terms of emphasizing, and that when we adhere to the precepts, the paramitas, the factors of enlightenment, the Eightfold Path, when we do that, we have to do that from the mind side. We cannot do it from the idea that we're grasping something and rejecting something. That's a samsaric attitude and cannot lead us to a deep realization. It can begin to bring the mind to a calmness, but it will not bring it to a realization just simply by trying to follow it to the letter. You're putting so much stress on the mind by doing that, rather than just simply letting letting it be, and just understanding that these are guideposts for us to be able to do. But when we are in accord with mind, in the proper way, here they're comparing it to the Tao, then there is no paramitas, precepts, factors of enlightenment. It is just simply the reflection of mind itself. Okay, so then we get to
Gilbert, excuse me, but Mark had a question.
Okay, go ahead. Mark?
No, I don't have a question. Sorry about that.
All right, hold on. Take a water break. Okay, now we're on the fifth one. And this one says, do not pursue conditioned existence. Do not abide in acceptance of emptiness. Here, it's interesting because it's referring to conditioned existence, and its apparent opposite, and I use the word apparent specifically, which is emptiness. And so it's saying you don't fall into or pursue conditioned existence. Pursuing conditioned existence is, I want this, I want this, I want to become enlightened, I want to do this, I want to be a better person, or I want this new car, I want this better job, I want this person as my spouse, you know, I'd rather replace my kids if I could, or whatever, you know. You're chasing things. The other one is saying, it doesn't matter, you know, whatever it is, it's all a dream anyway, so why bother with it? And again, here the reference is to the middle way. And again, the middle way, whether the middle way was intended as the Madhyamika school or Taoism, there's a spirit of both that are running through this in terms of trying to seek a balance with this, in terms of what's being said. And so then it says, in oneness and equality, confusion vanishes of itself. This is important, where when we look at things, when we maintain a calm mind in everything that we do, we utilize wisdom and pick wisdom moment to moment in what we do, then we can, it will come to us. Shifu used to say that trying to pull off your vexations is like trying to pull off leeches from your body if you had gone into a swamp. And you pull them off, but you can only pull off one at a time. And that even if you pulled it off, the head may stay in the skin and then cause an infection. He said Chan was like pouring salt all over your body. When you pour the salt all over your body, it creates an unwholesome environment for your vexations to stick. And as a result of that, because you give them no mind energy, no mind attention, then they naturally will disappear, because they are simple conjurings. We don't see that because they come up all the time. We don't see that. It would be like if all your life there was somebody playing drums behind you, you know, like a rock and roll drummer that was behind you all the time, you know, and your whole life was just filled with this cacophony of sounds that crash, boom, bang. And maybe to some of you that might feel like what your life is. And then all of a sudden, you know, you just don't pay attention to it anymore. And then it becomes silent. Whether it's actual silence or not, it doesn't matter. It's just that it does not have the same effect on you. Other people may hear it. but you don't hear it anymore. You are aware of it, but you don't hear it, and it doesn't get louder as it goes along. It just simply begins to dissipate on its own accord. This is the practice of Chan. This is letting go. The Taoists, they wanted to do this so that one could perfect themselves, similar to Confucianism perfecting the perfect person. The Taoists wanted to perfect the perfect immortal. But this is where Buddhism and Taoism veered off in terms of their training, where Buddhism went towards the esoteric understanding of just mind versus trying to achieve a perfect immortal that the Taoists were seeking in what they were doing. Next one, stop activity and return to stillness. And that stillness will be even more active. Think about this. Stop activity and return to stillness. And that stillness will be even more active. Does anybody know what this means? Or at least means to you? Anybody want to take a chance at it? I'm seeing talking, but then I'm not hearing anybody.
I saw
was
Ian.
there. All right, there you are. And then Yong was on there for a moment.
I see it as when our mind is still, we can do even more things than when it was filled with activities.
Okay. Ian, did you want to say something?
Sure. When you stop engaging in so much coarse activity and allow the mind to rest, then its clarity is much deeper. It can see that there's so much more going on than just at the surface. The causes and conditions that make up the coarse formations become apparent. And so what was before just a coarse thing, now there is a clarity as to all of the myriad other phenomena that needed to take place to make one apparent phenomena.
And then it also says it will be even more active. What do you say about that?
That makes me think about when the Buddhas, or those who are really advanced practitioners, that whenever they take action, its effects are incredibly far-reaching. A simple act spreads very, very deep and purposeful ripples.
Oh, that's a good way to say it. It's very similar to, Michael, are you moving your mouse?
Sorry, yeah.
I feel like wanting to swat it like a fly. Sorry. Okay. It reminds me of Pushen Pusa Samantabhadra, which is the bodhisattva that represents the function of mind and the dynamic function of activity of the mind, of carrying forth the wisdom and the compassion by action. And so when we're quiet and still in the present moment, we're aware of what is arising via pratika samapada, causes and conditions. And so we're aware of the causes, and we are also aware of the potential conditions that will arise from our body, speech, and mind afterwards. But in order to have this kind of awareness, we have to have the stillness of the mind, so we are not blocking it via the idea of the ego. When the ego is not present, then the mind functions perfectly in a very dynamic way, and it is full of activity. Just like Ian was saying, that these ripples go out, but it's based on what you're doing in the present moment that that determines what kind of ripples they are, whether there'll be tidal waves in the future or there'll be gentle waves of soothing and comfort and understanding that one is emanating in this moment. So it's actually a very beautiful way of looking at it and seeing it. But you have to understand the how the mind works in order for that to happen. This is why we practice right view to make sure that we have that kind of a way. In this view, I do not have a clock. So I don't know. I'm not sure what time it is.
It's 9:17. So
9:17?
13 more minutes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Then the next one is merely stagnating in duality. How can you recognize oneness? If you fail to penetrate oneness, both places lose their functions. So it's interesting in terms of this because they're talking about stagnating in duality. This is the idea of subject and object, and it's referring to the false nature of a sentient mind or ego, where one is seeing objects that are that are arising in the mind, and they believe it to be something that they see rather than mind not only perceiving it but creating it. Remember that. So when we're looking at things, not only do we see that this belongs to mind, but it also is something that it is created by mind. So this is right view. And when we use the right view, as I call applied, then we get this dynamic function, the one that Ian was referring to, that works. And so this particular part is pretty deep in terms of how it's looking, and it's saying, how can you recognize oneness? And the oneness here is ekayana, the idea of mind. And if you fail to penetrate the oneness, then both places lose their function. So mind and appearances lose their function, meaning they are just like a rudderless ship, just simply being moved around by habitual patterns in the mind. And just like a dream, you know, in a dream, you in your dream you can work all night long, but you're not going to get paid for it in the morning. Or you might have beaten up a bully or gotten beaten up, but you don't have bruises. You don't understand, you know, that this is a dream. And so, and we don't understand that where the dream comes from. So both places, mind and this absolute reality and apparent reality, lose their meanings. And it's difficult for us because we have a difficult time trying to balance out apparent reality and absolute reality and making any sense of it. And this is because we are trying to conceptualize the idea of the mind, which is way beyond the ability of a dream-like sentient being to conjure up. It can only conjure up, but it cannot experience mind. It is an experience of mind, but it does not experience mind. This is very, very important. The experience of mind is a realization. Realization is simply coming in accord with mind. not you coming in accord with mind, but mind coming in accord with itself. If you try to come in accord with mind, you cannot do that because mind cannot possibly pour in, the full mind cannot possibly pour into your consciousness. It would easily overload the whole system. And a lot of people, when they get realizations, that's in fact what happens, is there's an overload that they cannot experience, they cannot fathom what had even happened. Okay. The next one is banish existence, meaning going towards emptiness or shunyata, and you fall into existence. So if you try to banish it, you're actually doing what is there. You're trying to extinguish something. It is not extinguished in this way that we want to extinguish things, and many times even the idea of nirvana is misunderstood as an extinguishment of something rather than a realization of just the thusness of mind. And so then the next one says, and if you follow emptiness, you turn your back on it. So if you banish existence and you fall into existence, and if you follow emptiness, you turn your back on it. It's the same thing. It's just you're creating a duality there that you want to extinguish something. You don't need to extinguish it. You just simply have to realize that it is just mind. Then the next one this is number 9. Excessive talking and thinking, you turn from harmony with the way. Cut off talking and thinking, and there is nowhere you cannot penetrate. And this one here, the word the you in the last line kind of bothers me. I like the interpretation of the second translation, is that nothing remains unpenetrated, or the third one even, and pass freely anywhere. There isn't a you there. And that to me would, it may have said you, but to me it sounds better saying, and there is nowhere mind cannot penetrate, because it's mind penetrating mind. If mind is the coin of the realm, and you use mind to access something, it's just mind. So wherever mind goes. I know it sounds very silly, but it's that way, because your mind is penetrating. You cannot penetrate. You're not going to be able to penetrate anything, but mind can. And so when it's saying that, it's saying your self-nature of mind within you can penetrate. And then the last one for today, number 10, it says, return to the root and attain the principle. Pursue illumination and you lose it. So when we say return to the root and attain the principle, is essentially, we were talking about the principle before, everything is created by the mind. And so when we return to the root, what is the root? Anybody know what the root is? I'm rooting for you. Nobody knows. All this time I'm talking. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody?
Self-nature of mind?
Self-nature of mind? Yeah, you could say that. I would have just even accepted mind. So you return to the mind and attain the principle, because the principle's already there. It's like buying a car, and then they always have all these extra things you can add to it, a fancy stereo system or whatever. But if you return to mind, all those accessories are all included. Everything's there already. You don't have to add anything to it. And so, and it says, pursue illumination and you lose it. So if you're trying to look for wisdom outside of mind, then it's like turning off the light in your head and then looking around for a light bulb. It doesn't make sense. But if you see that clearly, then you will never lose it. And it says one moment of reversing the light is greater than the previous emptiness. So if you have a mind that is just empty, let's say you were meditating and you're just there and nothing's happening, you might think that that's a great accomplishment. But reversing the light, the ancients had a saying for this. Do you remember what it is about reversing the light? Anybody?
Look inwards.
Turning,
I think who came up first? Wei Shan?
Oh, yeah, I said look inward, right? You always say that.
Yeah. Is that what you're going to say, Michael?
yes, turning the mind's eye inward.
Yeah, that's right. You both had it. Yeah, turn the mind's eye inward. So when we turn the mind's eye inward, we're no longer looking at duality. We're essentially just simply illuminating what is appearing by virtue of mind's natural illumination. And the illumination is the clarity of mind that enables us to see precisely why things are appearing. We are not enamored with the appearances. We don't disdain the appearances. We just simply understand why they're arising because of pratika samappada. And this is much stronger than just simply dwelling in some kind of an emptiness where you just kind of crawl into a cage or a dark cave and never can see anything. This is quite the opposite. It's opening up the world, and illuminating everything with the natural light of mind. Okay, so we'll stop there. I think we're okay. I had 2 minutes left, but I'm not going to get through the next one in 2 minutes. So we'll stop there, and then we'll open it up to some questions. Yes, Michael.
Yes, so I have a question I wanted to ask a long time whenever I come across number 7, and because it's similar in all these translations, and it's talking about oneness. And so it's saying merely stagnating in duality, how can you recognize oneness? If you fail to penetrate oneness, those places lose their function. So I wonder whether this oneness here, is it the unified mind? Is it a pre-stage, or is it talking about realization of mind here already? So I never was sure.
Actually, kind of interesting how you phrased that. I didn't see it that way, but it could serve as an analogy, because if you remember, I always say that if everything returns to the one, where does the one return to? Exactly. And the idea of trying to say unified mind or everything returns to God or whatever, that one returns, and that is mind itself. So I think it's kind of a good way for you to look at things, to push beyond unified mind and to say that there's just mind, and it's so dynamic and so functional and operating on this pure wisdom that it's so filled with wisdom it can no longer be called wisdom. Because the entire mind is permeated with the wisdom. So when we see things, it's different. we cannot conjure up a meaning of that to penetrate the one. But I think that's important, because that's what I'm always talking about. And I think you're heading in the right direction, because this is the esoteric. Not too many people talk about this, Michael. They don't. I mean, they just talk about mind and that, and they leave it right there. But when you look at this, you really want to penetrate through to the esoteric, that which cannot be defined, cannot be touched, cannot be tasted, but yet it has all of those components. It has all of those perceptions. It's not devoid of them at all. Quite to the contrary, it is perfectly fused with it, but not as a one, but as mind. And this is where you have to take your contemplation to. You just have to take it to the next level. You're there, and you just asked the right question. So it's a matter now of you looking at it and trying to kind of literally taking it home, taking it to reversing the mind's eye inward and looking at it. I mean, because that's kind of puzzling to you in terms of that, but it's puzzling to you in a very, very good way. So I would say keep working at it, and then we'll see what comes of that one. All right, good question, Lewis.
Yes, thank you for this excellent discourse on trusting the mind or faith in mind, because it is a poem, and it's in rhyming couplets. So when they were trying to talk about, when the author was talking about the different things, he wanted to avoid no two. It's not two, right? To avoid all the dualism. But all the way through, it's talking about that. But it's also so very, very heavily weighted in Taoism. And I think that's the esoteric part of it. It's the Taoist perspective. I guess the more you talk or think, the more you don't make sense. And it's a different translation, but I was using the translation from Red Pine. And he talked a lot about the way those epigrams in traditional China were something like Hallmark cards. Mostly they were just written on something, written on doors, written on things. But this one survived because it's so important. This one lasted, and people keep translating it more and more. It's for me, it seems to be the essence of the teaching that that Damo and through to Huineng brought us, and all those the dualisms that large, small, smart, dumb, big, little, all of those things are connected. They're one. You can't have one without the other. And so when you look at one side, when you look at stillness, you have to have motion. You have to have motion. And when you look at silence, you have to have noise or music. And that's my interpretation of what we've seen so far in it. I might be a little off, but I think it's constantly, because it's rhyming couplets and it talks about dualism. That's an interesting thing. It's ironic. I like that. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, but I don't even see you, Lewis. So how would you explain that? Just think about that. The Taoism theme or spirit in faith and mind only takes you so far. And where it diverges is when we begin to understand Buddha nature is much, much more profound. And it barely touches, this poem barely touches on that aspect of it. You are right. It works in this idea of the negating this duality, This is called apocal theology. Another common name of it would be negative theology. And this is very much immersed in this negative theology, which is, it isn't this, it isn't that, it isn't this, it isn't that. And so if it isn't, then what is it? You know, it isn't even that. And the thing is that, again, we're here with ABCs at this point. It hasn't gone very deep yet. He's not going deep and throwing for a big touchdown or anything. He's just kind of laying it out and using this negative theology to look at things. But the thing about it is that where I'm emphasizing is the Buddha nature, and trying to draw out those points where they come to it, where all of these negations then are finished, and then what is there, not necessarily what is left, but what is there. And he only barely touches upon it in terms of calling it a mysterious principle, but not going beyond that to try to show any kind of an experience on that mysterious principle, in terms of the Buddha nature. At this point in time, that Buddha nature theology hadn't been yet as developed. So we're getting this proto Buddha nature here, not this Buddha nature that you see in the Vilamakruti Sutra or the Tathagata Garbha Sutras, any of them, the Queen Trimala Sutras. All of those are much, much deeper than this. But this sets out, it's important because, again, if we're building the stupa and we had Bodhidharma at the point, this is building out to develop a base. And so that can be worked from, and then work from there. But anyway, that's my take on this particular faith in mind. I don't see it as I see it as pivotal, but I don't see it as deep as the Tathagata Garbha Sutras can take you to, even some of the Prajna Paramita. But anyway, David, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Gilbert. Another book by Master Shen Yen I would like to read. This is all really brand new to me, this whole thing. I'm not sure exactly what my question is, but you were talking a great deal about emptiness, and it seemed to me that it was more of something that was not helpful in understanding this. Or could you maybe say a little more about that, or did I misunderstand it?
Well, again, David, the manner in which emptiness was explained here was, again, this apocal theology where it's like a negative, like it's neither this or this, be neither for nor against, that kind of a thing, be neither in apparent reality or absolute reality. Although he's definitely, apparently whoever was the author was not that schooled in those kinds of thoughts, because this is very, very basic. And so they're talking about emptiness in a way of the common kind of emptiness, more so rather than the profound emptiness of the Prajna Paramitas. And so you can see that it isn't very deep, and you're correct about that. He's using it as black and white, and it's neither black and white, but he's looking at it going, well, maybe it's gray. But that's as far as it takes it. Okay, I don't want to slam him, but I'm just looking at it in comparison, because I've been studying this for quite a while now. Okay. And so looking at it, and reading it, and then reading it for the presentation, and is a whole different level in terms of it, because I want to be able to answer questions like Lewis's and your questions. Those are very, very perceptive questions, but yeah, you're right. The emptiness was not fleshed out. We'll take up emptiness a little bit later on. I don't have 2 hours to give you the basics.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. We'll get there. But that's a good one for you to take a look at. All right, Robert.
Hi, I just want to be very quick. When Michael mentioned about number 7 on the one, penetrating the one, and I was curious. I went look up the Chinese version that Yongming provided earlier, and I put it on the chat line. It's two very simple sentence. It basically, let me try to explain it. It is as round and perfect as the ultimate void. Nothing is lacking, nothing is extra. It's just perfect. So the Chinese word by word translation, or at least when I saw it, that's what I realized, that in the Chinese poem, number 7th line. So just to offer what follow up with what Michael was saying, is to penetrate it is like this one, this mind is perfect. This everything is created by mind. There's nothing is extra, nothing is missing. There's no one useful, or you can even call it useful or useless, too much, too little. It's just perfect. So that's what I get from the translation.
Now tell me, Robert,
character.
Robert, 3 years ago, would you even be able to say that? Would you be able to realize what you just realized? Oh, I can't hear you now.
The 3 years ago, I will be in a complete loss, but right now, reading the Chinese version of it, it is so simple. It's just like talking.
Yeah, my point is this: is because you've been at it for this long of a time, all of a sudden what seemed to be very strained and opaque is now clear. This is the practice. That this, when we begin to get realizations without even knowing about it, because there's no you there. So if you just say, of course it's that way. But 3 years ago you would go, what tune are you playing it? And my point is that you progressed in terms of the practice, and it's simply because you ask questions and you ask questions, just like David is asking me questions now. Robert was your predecessor in that, and the thing is that when you see that, then you even know how to study, how to find things, how to make sense of things in terms of that. But it's just like me saying, form is another than emptiness, emptiness is another than form, form is precisely emptiness. It's saying the same thing. It's perfect. But you could not see that. How many times have you read the Heart Sutra and not understood? It's perfect. It's precisely that way. There's nothing out of place, not one hair out of place. It's this way. So you're progressing. So now you understand that. That's good. That's good. You just have to make the effort to do that. And as you begin to make the effort, it comes to you. Wisdom is seeking wisdom. So good. So that was just my comment to you. I understand from where you're coming from. Okay.
Yeah, I was confused. It's like it is the English translation from Master Xingyan and the professor and everybody. They over complex everything. Is simple.
Okay. And then Sister Jinho said your quote was from number 4, not from number 7. And that's where I saw it, where it says the way is perfect, like great space. And it is in this way, maybe you because these are just numbered. I don't know who numbered them, but it did show up a little earlier, but that's fine. I understood what you were saying with all of that. The penetration is being able to realize mind. We realize mind by simply experiencing mind itself. So it will work. Okay, now we'll get to Kai.
Hi, Gilbert.
Hello.
So I understand that the idea, concept of delivering sentient beings and great compassion and wisdom or unique to Mahayana Buddhism. Now, all of these are coming from the Buddha nature. And so in Hinayana, I believe they need to see the Buddha nature as well, because I'm not so familiar with them. That's my guess. So if this is the case, why from the Buddha nature, we have like two different directions or two different places to go? Should they all point to the same place?
It is a way in terms of how people interpret what Buddhism is, to say that the Theravadins are erroneous, or for the Theravadins to say that the Mahayanas are presumptuous and of things. It doesn't help. The Theravadins have their own way of dealing with deliverance of sentient beings. I think the main emphasis in Mahayana was the deliverance of sentient beings, simply because it points directly to mind, and I see it more as a complete system in terms of that. But it's not something that I would go, knocking on the doors of Theravadins and say, you're wrong. If you don't believe this, then you're going to hell or whatever. I think some religions do that, but I don't think we need to do that, and we don't need to do it with our brethren and sister and from the Theravadins. It is just, to me, natural the way I see the things, and again, the natural of the progression of Buddha Dharma is partially because I studied for so long and viewed the history and the development, and as you begin to practice, you're no longer just simply, let's say, a theologist or somebody presenting Buddha Dharma, but you have to be a historian, you have to be a philosopher. There's so many different caps that you have to wear in terms of looking at it and seeing how things were going and how they developed. To me, the Buddha Dharma from Mahayana, it just simply makes sense. It fit something that was missing, to me at least, in the Theravada. They may think the system is complete, and that's fine with them. To me, I still had this kind of a gnawing of like, there's more to this. And the more I began to study that, the more I went into the Chan, the more I went to Madhyamika and the Yogacara school. I studied Abhidharma, but then the Tathagata Garbha Sutras just were an incredible development as well. All of those things, to me, I see as an incredible wealth, and I would pity those who did not study those anymore, that people wouldn't study what the Buddha taught. So I think, to me, it's a more complete system, but it is okay. I mean, it is not something that they're Satan worshipers or anything like that. They have a different way of looking at it, than we do. And no, and if they have an ignorance towards us, then I pity them, and I certainly don't hold any ill will towards them. No, and I hope they don't have any towards us. I mean, basically, it's still Buddha Dharma. But anyway, that's how I would answer it, is that I see it as something, as a Mahayana, from the study that I've done, not just simply because I became a Buddhist last week, and because my parents were Buddhists, which they weren't. They were Roman Catholic. So you go figure how I ended up where I'm at now. I was always telling everybody I was a roaming Catholic because I was always roaming everywhere, and certainly wasn't in Catholicism. But in any case, I mean, I've studied this for a long time, and to me, at least for you're asking my opinion, it makes more sense. And I know it makes sense to you because you're beginning to develop into a really good practitioner, and a serious studier of things just by the nature of your questions that you ask all the time. So
understood. So if I interpret correctly, you are basically saying the self is steady and it guides you to different directions. And you always say, just be aware, don't make any judgment. So why the self will still function here?
Do not confuse the self with the awareness of the mind. This very question comes from mind, not from the self. It may appear that you are asking the question, but mind is asking the question under the guise of you. But as you begin to see that, then I look at it and say, oh, there is no Gilbert, and I know that in a few more years, for sure, there's not going to be a Gilbert, and if he, passes on, then he reappears again, I would suggest you run. I would be an abomination at that point. No, the thing is that the spirit would be there, and you'd be able to feel my spirit as I feel the spirit of Master Sheng. I feel the spirit of all the ancient masters. Why? Because it's all mind. They all ran through the same vein of mind. And it is that which asks the question. It is that which hungers for the realization. And that's good. And that's okay. We have the confusion. We think that it is us that are looking for this way out, but there's no way out. We just simply have to keep looking at the world as a dream. It's a dream, a dream, a dream. We see things so clearly that it's a dream. And when we wake up, we're in the wake dream. And when we go to sleep and we're in a dream, it's a dream within a dream. But we're clear about it. Little by little, we begin to see that, and we begin to rely less and less on the ego and the ego's opinion and the ego's desires and aversions. And then we just use this body. And this body is quite useful. I too have to struggle against, giving it the wrong food. It would be like if I was, no, it's hard. I mean, you give me a box of donuts in front of me, and and a whole day, and you might have to take an inventory of the donuts to see how well my practice was at that point. But I mean, we all have those kinds of moments in terms of things, but we try and we struggle. But at least that you're trying to not do that, but don't try to ever make yourself think that you have to be perfect. In due time you change, and that's good. We all change. I'm a much better person than I was when I was 20 years old. And and I look at that and I see that there's progress that's there, and that's all you have to do is just keep working. You have a very, very good condition to practice, and it's getting better, and so I hope that one day that you will be on a Zoom, or you'll be in front of people and talking about your old master or whoever he is. Okay.
Thank you. I'll try.
You'll do it. Okay. Any other questions? Wendy, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question, maybe very, very kindergartenish, but it's Robert said the quote, if it's that perfect, then I have two questions, like bear with me. Why are we trying, why am I trying to improve myself? Or why the world is like the war with Russia and all that? Like it's not as perfect as the ultimate void, or like, am I making sense? Thank you.
Well, yeah, especially in times of trials and tribulations that we're in now, and the difficulties in the world, it makes it difficult for us to look at this world and to make sense of it, and to make sense of, well, if this is the Buddha mind, how can the Buddha mind do this? And it's difficult. This is probably the hardest part in terms of looking at it. But I will still tell you that it makes more sense to me, due to habitual patterns and causes and conditions, that that all of these appearances of birth and death and struggles and terror and torture and death, they come from habitual patterns, from people who have power, people who want more, people who care less about whether somebody's life is terminated, or a 6-year-old little girl is dead, or a 18-year-old soldier is dead. No, this is the horror of this place, and it is the mind's disease, and we have to look at it in this way. To me, this makes more sense than to have, let's say, a God that sets everything into motion by perfect design, and saying, what's perfect about it? The Buddha mind does not interfere with appearances. It understands that these appearances are in sometimes very, very horrible, and through the ignorance and hatred and greed they appear. It is understood that it is a dream, but it's a bad dream. And this is in the Buddha nature, the interest in relieving the suffering and in restoring balance there. This is what Master Sheng was trying to do, to even create a Pure Land on earth. You know, that seems very lofty, but in the context of Buddha realms, it's not even that lofty, just to even have one place of dreams to be settled down. But at least we can try, and we can see that we're aware of it, and we're either part of the cause or letting it happen, or we have using expedient means to try to resolve this and learn and teach people from in the generations to come, don't follow this path. So it's difficult for us. It's something that I think that, and that's why all of the ancients always said that the human realm was the best realm to practice, because it's not all good, it's not all bad, but it gives you a mindfulness to be able to feel that it is unsettling, that this is not a good condition. And this is, the whole world is just a condition that appears within mind. The purity of the mind is there, but we have to begin to understand what this purity of the mind is. It's not easy for us to see this. It's not even easy for me to do this, because this is where I am always looking at. Your question's a very, very good question, because it goes to the very essence of Buddha Dharma, and whether Buddha Dharma makes any sense or not. But I can say it makes more sense than having a divine being moving pieces around like chess pieces and saying, and knocking them over, knocking this knight over, knocking this castle over in some kind of a game. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why would any supreme being want to do that? The Buddha is at harmony with mind, but it does not interfere with the appearances. It doesn't work that way. It is not a supreme being. It is mind. And yet that mind does have a compassionate nature to it. This is the part that we have to work on and to begin to delve into. How does this compassion work? Does it fit? Why can't the Buddha wave his gigantic hand and make this all go away? But then again, it's a dream. When one awakens, then the dream is still there, but one is aware of that. But like Shifu told me, he said, but Gilbert, remember, it only stops for you. And so that to me was you have to awaken others. You cannot leave them in this sorrowful state. And this is what we're charged with, to do this. We can use this corporal body for some good. We are like the, what do they call those crabs that they jump into a shell and they use the shell. And then when they outgrow that one, they hermit crab, and then they go into another shell. And that's what we do. When I'm done with this shell, I'm coming back and getting another shell. And who knows what it's going to look like. As long as it has a mouth that I can talk with, that's fine. But this is what we do. Your question is a very profound question. I mean, and it's not one that's easy to answer, and I'm answering it as honestly as I can. But keep asking those questions, please. Okay, I think we've got to the end, unless there's any one last questions. Anybody? No? All right, we'll continue on next week. I think today was a good one. And again, part of this is even not so much that it was so deep of Buddha Dharma, as much as giving you a historical sense of the dawning of Chan. And that's important so that you are not ignorant of what you're studying. The worst thing you could do is just, if people ask you something, the only thing you can do is recite the Heart Sutra, but you don't even know what it's about. But if you really start opening and studying, then this is what Shifu was stressing. He was stressing that the Sangha, including the practitioners, all practitioners, we have to be educated. We have to be knowledgeable of our practice. He came from a time when all the Buddhists they were doing was presiding at death ceremonies when people were dying or they died for some money that they could take back and sustain the monastery. And he was going like, what good is that? I mean, we're not really doing anything, ringing bells and clanking wood or whatever, but we're not doing anything. So I hope that you guys, I see a lot of you the same faces, and I'm happy to see them, because that means that there's an interest in this, and I'm doing my best to give you a solid background on Buddhism and now on Chan Buddhism, so that you're when you talk to people, you talk to them in a knowing way. Okay, so please keep sending well wishes to the Ukraine and to the world and to the leaders, and for some form of compassion on Putin's part. Doesn't seem like that might work, but we can always hope for some changes in the world. You never know how things change. Okay, take care. Amitofo. See you next week.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you so
You're
much,
welcome.
Thank you, Gilbert.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Bye.
Bye.
Gilbert.
Me so full. Master.
You
What's
wanted
that?
to look, look.
Oh,
Oh, adorable. Oh my gosh.
Down you go. She doesn't like to be held. I don't know where the other one is.
you got two?
Yeah, I've got two of them here. So there's the other one. They've been pretty good. They haven't been like barking or anything. Every once in a while you'll hear them walking out the door. There's a door behind.